Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast, titled, You Can't Become What You Can't Accurately See, an investigation into Blackness in documentary photography.
In this episode, we will explore the historical, social, and political intricacies of photography. I'm one of your hosts, Francesca, and joining me today, my co-host, Isaiah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
In today's podcast episode, we're going to dissect a photograph by Larry Fink from his Harlem Youth Congressional School collection. Hey Isaiah, let's start with a brief introduction.
Hi everyone, I'm Isaiah, and I want to introduce you guys to the subject of our podcast episode today. Today's photograph, held from Harlem Youth Congressional School collection, is a photograph taken by New York photographer Larry Fink. Born in 1941 in Brooklyn, New York, Fink is a distinguished American photographer known for his stylistic and candid documentary photography. Throughout his career, Fink has carved a niche for himself in the realm of social photography, capturing the essence of American life through different socioeconomic classes.
Larry Fink is known for his ability to depict the raw, unfiltered moments within social gatherings, parties, and rural landscapes. Fink aims to provide a poignant commentary on the human condition. In one of the captivating images from Fink's Harlem Youth Congressional School collection, he transports us to a crucial moment in Black history. Through intentional composition, nuanced symbolism, and his skillful plays with light, Fink's photograph evolves beyond mere documentation into a compelling visual narrative that intersects themes of race, power, education, and community. Captured in Harlem in 1964, this archival pigment print, which measures 22 by 17 inches, centers around a Black gentleman delivering a captivating speech to a Black audience. With Fink standing behind the speaker, his face is obscured with mystery, guiding our attention to the broader group. Fink's position emphasizes the speaker's confident stance, as well as the monumental nature of this event. The gentleman, as well as his audience, are both elegantly attired, projecting an air of conscious unity and shared purpose. I want to bring up my favorite detail of this photograph. I really like the notebook held in the speaker's right hand. He almost seems to be hiding it from the audience. I think the notebook symbolizes the meticulous preparation that he took before the event. Even if it's a small detail, I think it reveals a lot to us about this meeting, especially with the fact that it's gone pretty anonymously on the internet.
Thanks for that addition, Francesca. I agree. The fact that he is not reading off the notebook is also important because it exudes confidence and preparation. He maintains a firm posture, gesticulating to the audience who is clearly captivated by his speech. Francesca, I wanted to know more of your opinion on Larry Fink's use of light and shadows.
Thanks for that question, Isaiah. Well, as with a lot of Fink's photos, the presence of light, especially within the black and white framework he creates, carries a significant power to our visual analysis, thinking both literally and metaphorically, systematically and individually. There is almost an ethereal beam of light that Fink positions onto the speaker, endowing him with a sort of godlike aura. Fink's use of light totally transforms the drama of the photograph, as it inputs an aura of gravitas to everything. Even further, it is important to note how the concept of race and racialization is implied by the black and white filter.
Yes, Francesca, I was thinking the same thing, because it seems that Larry Fink is the only white person in the room. I think it's important for us to think about the larger societal implications of Fink's race in taking this photo.
Totally, Isaiah. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Fink's literal position, both as a white photographer, but also with the fact that he is standing directly behind the speaker, underlines a sort of proximity, similarly to what you were talking about before with the sort of keen closeness to his subjects. We're feeling both this intimacy within Fink's positionality, yet at the same time, we're sort of at a distance due to the fact that we can't see the speaker's face.
Yeah, and I also want to note that I like how contradictory this photograph is. I feel like we're being pulled in so many different directions in our visual and theoretical analysis. Like the photo is ingrained in such black and white binary, yet at the same time, the intricacies of his intentional choices in composing the photo still stand.
I agree. I think it's important to understand that nothing in photographic analysis is static. Photographic analysis is fluid. It's contradictory. It's confusing. We can observe the intimacy in this photo, but we can also observe the distance between Fink and the speaker. Both of these concepts can coexist. They're not mutually exclusive.
For sure, and I think it's worth mentioning that this photo is considered to be a documentary photograph. Moving past the literal function utility of the documentation, what is this photograph documenting, if anything at all? Do we think a white photographer has the agency to document a black audience? Let's think about the racial and social hierarchies at play.
Even his social status as a relatively well-known photographer creates an aura of ethnography. Even if that's being a bit far-fetched, which we actually don't think so, I don't think we can ignore the way that race is presented in this photo.
Honestly, my favorite part of this photo is just how much we can pull it apart. On the surface, this photograph seems simple, man giving speech, but just taking a second to think about the larger picture here, Fink engages in implicating power and systemic racism.
That's a really good point, Isaiah. I totally agree with what you say about the simplicity of it. I think the fact that we can pull apart so much analysis and theory within this photo is in large part due to Fink's positionality as a well-known white photographer. I want to take a moment and acknowledge my own positionality within the podcast. I'm a white woman, and I understand the unearned privileges that I've been given as a result of my whiteness. I want to acknowledge that, although I critique a white photographer for profiting off of an ethnographic photo of a black audience, that I too am benefiting from this historical moment. The fact that I have the ability to make judgments and arguments about Fink's white privilege and whiteness as a white person in this primarily academic context is almost hypocritical. It is necessary for me to acknowledge how my whiteness allows me to enjoy the academic freedom to make claims on systemic racism implications in this photo. And ultimately, I remain untouched by the effects of this institutionalized oppression, and in fact, I'm benefiting from the white privilege it grants me, without any consequences.
As a young black man from New York, I was immediately drawn to this image. Out of all the photographs available to us, this was the only image with black people as the subject. Being black, I initially noticed the definite racial undertone that Fink depicted in this photograph. The black and white filtering really stood out to me. This image feels strange to me. It feels very ethnographic to me. We need to try and reason through Fink's possible intentions for taking this photo. The more I look at this photograph, the more I struggle to give Fink the benefit of the doubt.
Thanks for that, Isaiah. I appreciate the fact that you are upfront about your struggles with this photograph. It is difficult to reach a definite conclusion on such a profound image. Throughout this podcast episode, we will reference a lot of ideas from Shawn Michelle Smith's Photographic Returns, where she engages in a more theoretical dissection of blackness within the medium of photography. I'm going to walk you through the Cliff's Notes version of her thesis in Photographic Returns now, as we believe it acts as an excellent foundation for us to build upon in the rest of the podcast. Firstly, Smith's thesis is highly effective because it intersects the functionality of the camera as a temporal disruption with the possibility of racial justice. Against the chronology of time, Smith argues that photography offers us a route to visualize the ways in which the past continues to punctuate our present. Smith writes that the temporal disruption of the photograph is able to, quote, expose the unfinished work of racial justice in the United States and the racialization of the rights and privileges that persist today, end quote. Not only am I obsessed with the sheer brilliance of this parallel that Smith sets up, but I'm also forced to apply it to Larry Fink's photograph. Emphasizing this decolonial approach to photographic analysis, Smith invites us to consider our analysis in a non-chronological nature. Instead, she emphasizes the plurality and continuity of the fight towards racial justice. In turn, then building a photographic analysis that emphasizes this dynamic relationship between the past, present, and future.
That's a really good idea, Francesca. I wanted to point out her reference to Frederick Douglass. Did you know that in the 19th century, Frederick Douglass was the most photographed person? He saw the photograph as both a medium of progress and objectification.
That's such an important juxtaposition. This dual perspective resonates with many of our class discussions surrounding the camera as both a tool of violence and of colonialism, promoting reflection on almost the contradictory role of photography, as both an impetus for change and a drag against futurity.
Smith's piece is an essential component of the foundation on top of which we build our analysis. In the rest of our podcast, she forces us to understand that photographs are not static, but rather as dynamic agents shaping our understanding between the past and the present.
Using the framework of Smith's argument on analytic continuity, I argue that Larry Fink's whiteness is a central and unavoidable lens through which we must interpret his portrayal of the Harlem Youth Congressional School speech. The inherent imbalance of power and perspective arising from Fink's whiteness raises questions about his qualifications to capture the essence of Black experiences. I want to dissect how Fink's whiteness taints this photograph.
It is essential to note that Fink is operating within an artistic medium that was historically designed to only institutionalize white perspectives.
Totally, Isaiah. We can't ignore the systems of power at play here. I really like what you said earlier about the black and white filtering on this image. The fact that this image is both literally and figuratively existing in a black and white binary is seminal to our analysis. Differently from color photography, black and white photography is colloquially known to be more objective and data-driven. This raises questions about the ethnographic context of this photo, and it really underlines this concept of racialization that Fink is clearly playing into.
You put that really nicely, Francesca. The photograph then becomes a nuanced space where the implications of Fink's racial identity shape the atmosphere that he captured. His positionality clearly influences the dynamics that are created between Larry Fink and his photographic subjects. I think we should bring in some context on the Shirley card for our audience, specifically the Shirley card renovation in 1995. I think there are definite parallels that emerge which help us prove how Fink intentionally participates in ethnographic depiction of black people.
Thanks for that great segue, Isaiah. I totally agree. In this next segment of our podcast, we will delve into the history of black documentary photography, with a special focus on the Shirley card and the institutionalized exclusion of the black community from the medium of photography.
We'll be reflecting on the institutionalized racism. More broadly, in the context of the camera, looking at how the black community has historically interacted with the camera. Thinking about the implications of such of the camera as both a tool of violence and oppression, and its implications within the black community.
The questions that we'll be focusing on in this segment include: how is the fight for racial justice intersected with technological innovations in photography?
What is the black gaze? Can a white photographer meaningfully acknowledge the history and separate their photograph from it? Let's uncover these layers, Francesca.
Thanks for that introduction, Isaiah. The Shirley card, a seemingly innocuous tool, unveils an alarming history that lies at the root of all photographic technology. Aside from its objective use as a reference card for photographers to calibrate their photos, it's worth noting that it was designed with a bias toward representing lighter skin tones. The real-world consequences of this exclusion meant that color balance in photographic technology was optimized for capturing and reproducing lighter skin tones more accurately. In turn, individuals with darker skin tones were underrepresented and inaccurately depicted in photography with those settings based on the Shirley card.
That is really interesting, Francesca. That pairs really well with Fink's photograph. This historical context of photography is such necessary background for the rest of our research. We really cannot separate this history from our analysis of Fink. We need to put our analysis of this photograph into the context of institutionalized inclusion of the black community.
I agree, Isaiah. Simply put, we cannot separate photography from its inherently racist beginnings. The Shirley card's foundation of exclusion is solely another example of how technology was designed to exclude non-white people from participating in it. In Sarah Lewis's New York Times article titled "The Racial Bias Built into Photography," she delves into this unconscious bias that exists at the foundation of this technology. She writes, quote, "By categorizing light skin as the norm and other skin tones as needing special corrective care, photography had altered how we interact with each other without us realizing it. Photography is not just a system of calibrating light, but a technology of subjective decisions."
Lewis does the necessary job of acknowledging the notion that photographs are not neutral, and that we cannot ignore the prerequisite decisions that determine a photograph. The subjectivity and objectivity of a photograph is important, and Lewis' argument reveals the photograph is not a game of chance.
Exactly. Photographs are not surface level. Rather, they grow out of a multitude of decisions, calculations, and manipulations in order to reach a desired outcome. Even further, this historical tendency to treat light skin as the standard, therefore prioritizing the establishment of white experiences and white skin in photography, in turn presents one skin tone as the norm and the other as deviations. Photography clearly contributed, perpetuated, and shaped societal attitudes and racial biases of people engaging in photography. Even further, I want to emphasize the same point that Lewis makes, which is the fact that modern-day technology is still mostly catered to white people. The modern-day remnants of this institutionalized technological racism is still all around us. Lewis writes, quote, You see it whenever dark skin is invisible to facial recognition software. The same technology that misrecognizes individuals is also used in services for loan decisions and job interview searches. Yet, algorithmic bias is at the end stage of a long-standing problem." End quote. I think Lewis raises a really key parallel here as to how the camera is both a tool of violence and of oppression. Similarly to what Shawn Michelle Smith said about Frederick Douglass's opinion on photography, he saw it as a contradictory apparatus that was, at the same time, a seminal vehicle towards the fight for racial justice. Being the most photographed man in the 19th century, Douglass understood that photography presented a medium to create a, quote, corrective image about race and American life, end quote, and therefore he used it to his advantage.
That's a really crucial part of our analysis. It's the fact that these contradictions can coexist. I argue that we can try to reorient our perspectives of Fink's photograph in such a way that both acknowledges Fink's whiteness and celebrates the historical moment that he captures.
That's a great point, Isaiah. I think we should move on to thinking about how Fink navigates the social and racial hierarchies in his other works. With the institutionalized exclusion of Black experiences and the technology of the Shirley card in mind, bringing it back to Larry Fink, we need to realize how Fink operates in this treacherous territory, and whether or not he seems to address his whiteness at all. To guide us through this discussion, we bring in the insightful perspective of Tina Campt in A Black Gaze. Here, Campt explores the different artistic mediums through the lens of reorienting visual culture, mediums, and art to incorporate the multiplicity of Black experiences. Firstly, when dealing with a photograph that is so deeply ingrained in the racial binary, it is important to shift our perspective away from Fink's and to that of the larger group. Thinking hypothetically, how would Fink's photograph transform if it were instead captured by a Black photographer? How would our perspective shift? How would the captured atmosphere change? How is Larry Fink depicting and portraying race?
Those are some really complex ideas, Francesca. And I like your use of rhetorical questions. I think we both agree that Fink's photograph would be hugely different if taken by a Black photographer instead. Obviously, these are all relatively rhetorical questions, as it's clear that Fink's photograph would be much different if taken by a Black photographer.
I agree with you, Isaiah. That being said, I found Campt's exploration into the Black gaze to be a very useful tool in my analysis of Fink's photograph. Campt critiques the societal framework for viewing Blackness as a peripheral identity. Campt writes, "Much too often, Black life is rendered in ways that allow it to be engaged at a safe distance or viewed at arm's length through a lens of pity, sympathy, or concern. It is a temporary point of connection, visited and left behind in the face of an inevitable return to the comfort and comforting perspective of the self and home." End quote. This notion of impermanence reminds me a lot of Larry Fink's photograph. This idea works as a really nice microcosm of the racial and power hierarchies behind his role as a well-known white photographer operating the camera as a tool of oppression in the hopes of documenting a Black audience. His white privilege allows him to be in that space temporarily, and he does not have to bear the infinite burdens of systemic, educational, and environmental racism in the United States. Fink is allowed to be a passerby in this situation and to take advantage of the Black community for his own artistic gain.
I agree with how direct you are, Francesca. And if I'm being honest, it seems that Fink took this photograph for clout. This is clearly an ethnographic photograph, despite the fact that I think we would incredibly benefit from having this moment captured by a Black photographer. I would say we have the opportunity to appreciate that we even have this moment solidified and institutionalized in photography at all. At the same time, it is beyond necessary to fully comprehend what is visible in the photograph.
I like this notion of reading what is invisible in the photograph. To look beyond objective people and things and to instead look at the invisible institutions of systemic oppression and social hierarchies that exist within the moment that Fink captured. I think I should point out that it's important to try and remove the author's implied intentions from your analysis of this photograph. By decentering the white perspective from this photograph, we are engaged in a process of decolonizing it, therefore valuing the Black experience and Blackness that is portrayed in Fink's photograph, giving the due power and the due recognition that was once given to Fink back to this unnamed group of activists. Therefore, it is totally necessary to reorient Fink's narrative and to reappropriate it for the Black community. Now Isaiah is going to take us through the rest of Campt's thesis.
Moving back to Campt's thesis, she puts forth the idea that blackness exists in polarity. Presenting blackness within the framework of multiplicity, Campt strives to create oppositional and complex representations of blackness that challenges the spectator.
Campt's theory on the black gaze connects to our previous discussions on how Fink's positionality affects his qualifications to portray black experiences. The black gaze is an institutional refusal to pacify the colonial ego. It's a means to shift the viewer's power dynamics and to make the act of viewing less passive. Tina Campt goes so far as to say that photography cannot exist outside of its historical foundations, writing, quote, "It doesn't matter if a black person is behind the camera or not, because the camera itself functions as an instrument of the white gaze. Firstly, it is undeniable that the camera is a colonial tool of white power, but I am choosing to side with a Wendy Red Star type framework, where I am forced to be hopeful of the idea that a black photographer depicting blackness through photography is an immense act of artistic sovereignty and agency. Moreover, the act of refusing to comply with the constraints of the white gaze is an incredible act of agency."
Francesca, that's a really important argument that you just made. My one caveat of Campt's argument is that I believe that a black photographer has the ability to fight back against the white gaze of the camera. And in doing so, they are actively resisting the camera's innate violence and reappropriating it for their own sovereignty.
I totally agree, Isaiah. In this way, I guess we are also siding with Frederick Douglass's viewpoint, as Smith points out in Photographic Returns. Douglass saw the camera as a liminal object. It was both oppressive yet liberating. Despite the fact that we cannot deny the deep-seated racist history that exists behind the camera lens, I think black photographers are a crucial ingredient to this process of reckoning. In order to recalibrate the camera, and the entire medium of photography for that matter, to operate within the black gaze, we must institutionalize the experiences and lives of black folks through it. Now, we're going to walk you through some of our concluding thoughts.
As we wrap up our journey, we conclude with reflecting on how Fink's whiteness shapes his photograph. How is Larry Fink disrupting the black gaze in his photograph? Can we make a distinction between Fink's photograph and ethnographic intent with the way in which this picture documents a pivotal moment in the fight of racial and educational justice? How can we grapple with the camera being both a tool of oppression and liberation? Is Fink responsible for addressing his whiteness?
Thanks for those thoughts, Isaiah. Maintaining Smith's argument that photographs have analytic continuity and fluidity, we assert that Larry Fink's whiteness serves as a central and inescapable lens through which we must interpret his depiction of the Harlem Youth Congressional School. In this podcast, we've explored what is invisible in this photograph, looking at the systems of power and oppression that work below the surface to create a complex web of analysis. Positioned within this artistic medium that historically solely institutionalized white perspectives, Fink's deliberate participation in an ethnographic depiction of this black community becomes apparent, adding layers of complexity and blame to our understanding, operating the camera as an object of violence in this quest for ethnography.
The underlying power imbalance stemming from Fink's racial identity, as well as his peripheral positioned camera, prompts serious questions about his ability to capture black experiences. Most obviously, Fink's choice of black and white filtering points out the essential racialization which occurs. Being perceived as an objective, this choice carries with it a necessary implication of ethnography.
Exactly. The black and white photograph, which was once considered a symbol of objectivity and reliability, is fully flipped here. We're transformed into a realm with complicated and nuanced terrain, where Fink's identity becomes an inescapable nucleus of our analysis. This photograph evolves into a more nuanced space where Fink's racial identity wholly informs the captured atmosphere, dictating the intricate dynamics between the photographer and his black subjects. Through examining case studies such as the Shirley card and works by Shawn Michelle Smith, Sarah Lewis, and Tina Campt, parallels emerge, hinting at Fink's, whether intentional or unintentional, don't matter, his participation in this ethnographic representation of the black community. This nuanced and somewhat cynical interpretation allows us to juxtapose the historical climate, inviting a deeper exploration of the complexities inherent to the intersections of race, power, and Fink's whiteness within this visual narrative. This prompts us to rethink the narratives that's presented, and to question the hidden biases and histories within the art of documentary photography. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Larry Fink's photography. Until next time, keep being curious, keep exploring, and keep learning. Thank you so much for listening.